And so we're grateful for that and grateful for Dr. Thorpe, who's here to talk with us. And let me read a bit about her so we can get started and hear what she's got to say and have a bit of a talk back with her as much as she feels as though she can do for us today. So I'm going to read this for us by Dr. Christine Thorpe. Dr. Christine Thorpe, and this is, I'm using this, and I'm sure there's a lot more about her that is not written here because you can't write a whole life in just a couple of paragraphs. So Dr. Christine Thorpe is the Dean of the Nathan Weiss Graduate College at Kean University. Her expertise includes women's health and wellness program planning and evaluation, health disparities and historical traumas, holistic nutrition, patient navigation, motivational interviewing, health literacy, health policy, and management. Dr. Thorpe is a certified wellness coach and health educational specialist with over 20 years experience in higher education and the health and human services field. She holds a Bachelor of Science degree in psychology from Syracuse University, a Master of Education degree in International Education in Educational Development, and a doctorate in health education from Teachers College, Columbia University. In addition to research publications, Dr. Thorpe is also the author of Living Beyond the Facade, Inside the Health and Wellness Practices of Successful Americans of African Descent. And so we are very pleased to have her with us today and to speak to us on her topic, which will explain to us. And so Dr. Thorpe, please come, and we welcome you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Williams. Thank you, Sora Akins. And guests, glad to see you here. Thank you so much for attending. It really is a pleasure to have the opportunity to come and speak. I always welcome the opportunity, and I appreciate it very much. It means a lot to me to be able to cross the campus and connect with Africana Studies. I had a minor in African American Studies as an undergraduate, so whenever there's an opportunity to make connections with one of the departments that helped to form me as an educator, I welcome the opportunity. So I definitely thank you, thank you, thank you. So I shall begin on standing on the promises, consciously paying it forward. As diasporic people originating in Africa, we have maintained threads of our history and our identity through a bevy of sources that whisper life into each future generation. Each of us is a living manifestation of ancestral behaviors, memories, and beliefs surrounding the value of life and the future through the soul enveloped by flesh. Even though I have the honor and privilege of being the dean of the Graduate College here at Kean, where I touch lives and guide students in their career aspirations, what you may or may not know about me is that my parents came to this country where I was born, which afforded me the opportunity to access education and resources to help make me the woman I am today. But what I'm sure you don't know about me is that I should not be here. You see, in 1944, my 22-year-old grandmother gave birth to my mother, who was born prematurely at 2.5 pounds in a Nato Bay hospital in Jamaica, what some call either a developing or third world country. And of course, in 1944, there were no neonatal intensive care units to care for preemies. But my mother was so tiny that my grandfather could hold her in his hand. After my infant mother stayed in the hospital for 10 days, the doctor told my grandparents to take her home and said, if she lives, she lives. He told my grandmother to keep her in the sun to prevent her from developing jaundice and gave her a medicine dropper to use to feed my mother. So my grandfather, in his creativity, made a little brown box, padded it up, and my grandmother put my mother in it and would sit with her under the mango tree next to their house to bathe her in the sunlight. My great-grandmother would make fish broth from the catch my grandfather would get daily from the Caribbean Sea to feed my mother through the medicine dropper. Now, this is not what one would give to newborn babies to eat. We know this, right? But it was used to supplement the goat's milk that was also given to my mother to nourish her fragile frame. My grandmother knew nothing about caring for such a fragile life. And sadly, she was told by her friends that she should have left my mother in the hospital to die. And it disheartened her and it broke her. So I'll pause for a moment and just say, I asked my mother to tell me her story again, and I've heard it over the years. And for her to tell me the story again, but then add, it broke her mother's heart for her friends to tell her to leave her baby in the hospital to die, that she wasted her time bringing this tiny life home to try to nurture it and cultivate it and bring it to full life and health. However, my grandmother fought for her baby, my mother, and fought for her life because deep within there were the promises of the future and gifts to be continued through the lineage. It is because of their fight that my mother is now 76 years old, happy, go lucky. The woman she giggled at the fact that I was telling her birth story. So I will tell her that people listened and were moved by the story because it's not just some little story, but can resonate with people on a number of levels. But it's her story and her life that has enabled me to be here today to share my story. And I'm committed to reminding everyone here that somewhere in your lineage, someone saw a diamond in the rough, polished it, nurtured it, and cultivated it so that you could be here today to stand on the promises of your ancestors. So I shared this story because each of us in this room is here because we truly are our ancestors' wildest dreams. In case you've forgotten, whether living, deceased, familial, or ancestral, our ancestors have made promises in the depths of their soul, consciously or unconsciously, that propelled each generation forward. Now, these promises are more than Webster's definition of promises as a statement telling someone that you will definitely do something or that something will definitely happen in the future. When we talk about the promises of our ancestors, we must consider the stories they told that were painted through their mind's eye that evoke us to unspeakable levels of emotion. The beliefs and traditions that were passed down with the phrase, that's just the way my grandmother or my mother did it. That's just the way it is. That's how we did it. And when we consider the unspeakable exercises of faith that could move mountains And most definitely, we must consider the atrocities they bore in excruciating pain with fear and defiance. So, as stated by the poet Dr. Monique Farrell, our ancestors must have felt accepting of the idea that we will overcome all things, even as we put our black bodies on the line, as they ran from the slave owners. Our elders must have felt this as they sat at diner counters and stared down dogs and officers, that we are worth the time and the sacrifice. The journeys of our ancestors are peppered with moments that lit their paths like the North Star and shook their feet like the thunderous wails and groanings of their souls that continue to move to and fro on the earth seeking rest. And yet, deep in the bosom of our ancestors was the powerful promise of a better life in this life, not in the next. Each of us right now can think of a moment in history, whether in our family, familial, or societal, where a promise was made that directly or indirectly changed that trajectory of your journey. If you're faculty or staff, think about that pivotal moment that inspired you to share the promises that manifest your gifts in higher education. If you are a student, think about that pivotal moment that made college a reality for you. Just stop and think about it. Now focus on that moment quietly and quietly feel the feelings that it evokes in you. Because each and every one of us has a moment, that pivotal moment that changed your life. You should be stirred in your soul by the memory of that moment. And this moment of clarity and mental awakening is the consciousness of what rings inside of you, what becomes the wind beneath your wings, and what propels you to soar in your blackness. The spirit of consciousness is still central, as stated by a good colleague of mine, Dr. Martha Effinger Critchlow, indicating that our blackness continues to transcend and carry forth the spirit of who we are as Americans of African descent. We know our walk here is neither by accident or happenstance, but is a result of the steadfast belief that better days are coming. In the spirit of this consciousness and honoring our ancestors, how do we channel what we have received, these precious gifts from our ancestors? And how do we consciously pay it forward to others around us and the next generation? We channel what we have received by taking a mindful approach and thoughtfully making choices, decisions, and taking action. We often use the word intentionality or being intentional, which essentially means that we move in a deliberate fashion. But what does that look like for us today as that moment that changed our trajectory resonates inside of us? So first, when we talk about choices, our choices are opportunities that have been built on the backs of those who came before us, who did not have the same choices, but stood on the promise that one day our people would have freedom. Our people desired this because freedom was everything. As writer Audre Lorde stated, our visions begin with our desires. While our ancestors consistently lived at the crossroads between life and death, they had visions of much more for us. Sadly, would they ever think that we would have a Black Lives Matter movement and still have to fight for our dignity today? You see, our choices are truly opportunities to further change the landscape of how Black lives are and will be valued. We must always remember who we are, the deep value of our existence, and make choices in our lives knowing that the historical investments in us must reap dividends and not small change. Next, our decisions are the directions we take with the choices presented before us to chart the direction of our lives. What should we do? Which way should we go? We ask ourselves these questions all the time, attempting to make the best decision that would cause us either the least harm or the greatest benefit. And when we make decisions, excuse me, when we make decisions, we must look at not only how it impacts us personally, but how it impacts us as a group, and what message we will be sending that will reverberate long after us. Every decision we make has a ripple effect, just like the decisions our ancestors made that continue to echo today. And finally, our actions are the moves we make based on these decisions. And you know the phrase, your thoughts create your reality. Our actions are based on the programming in our minds, much of which we inherited. When we decide to make moves that have taken into account the opportunity of choices and thoughtful decisions, we bring honor to our ancestors in an effect to demonstrate that we are standing on the promises that have brought us to this very moment in time. We must take our actions that leave an impactful footprint, not just only in our circles, but in our community and in our society. Our actions now become those new historical moments, whether familial or societal, where we indirectly or directly change the trajectory of someone else's journey. With all that we have been afforded, paying it forward to others around us and the next generation is our call to honor our legacy and treating it better than gold. Too often we hear stories of how we don't look out for each other, forgetting that we are our brother and sister's keeper, forgetting that our survival required that we looked out for each other. The promises we have reaped are not for us to hoard or squander, but for us to now take up the responsibility of building the future. So, I want you all to think of 3 ways you can pay your gifts forward as a way to honor the ancestors. And in that thought, I challenge you to consciously pay it forward to someone else, regardless if they're a friend or relative, knowing that your gift can touch or save a life. So I will close with a verse from the old church song that my mother and grandmother would sing, standing on the promises that cannot fail when the howling storms of doubt and fear assail. By the living word of God, I shall prevail, standing on the promises of God. Thank you. All right. Mm-hmm. Yes. At, my mother came in 1969. My father came in 1970. My grandfather had an opportunity to come to the States to do some work, and he stayed here for a few months, and he said, "Oh, I have to go back to Jamaica." Um, my grandmother came when I was a child and stayed for a little while, and then she went back as well. My grandfather came to the States, I think, in the 50s. And coming from a place where, you know, being black was the norm, and coming here, it confused him. And he was not familiar with or understanding of the fact that he couldn't go certain places because my grandfather was a very proud, very high chested man. Like, you can't touch him. He was fabulous. And to come to this country and to experience this, he said, "Oh no, I'll make my little bit of money and leave. This is not, nobody should live like this." And he never came back to the States again. And interestingly, my uncles seem to have gotten the same message. They'd visit, but they would never come and live in the States. They've gone to Canada, they've gone to England, but they never wanted to come to the States. I thought that was a really interesting twist from his life experience. And my mom came. My mom came, other family members were here, and the desire was to start a new life, build a family. And my father came the year afterward, and I came along a few years later, and I have a brother, and the whole thing is get an education. You're in this country. This is an opportunity to grow and learn. We've come a long way, and we're here. You're going to do right by the family and build the next generation. So when you hear the stories of how life was, my mother said, "Oh, I grew up poor. You would never tell me I was poor. I had a great life. I ran around and played and jumped around. It was great in the country." Being a premature baby who, lived by, well, I will say God's grace to be alive at a time when, babies of that size at that time would never make it. So I built the talk on that life, on that story, because that is how I got here, and I know everybody has something that ties into why you are here and why you do what you do. And when you lack that motivation and you think it's hard, you think, wow, somebody had it really hard before me for me to get here. How can I stand on that promise and build for someone else after me and pay it forward? And our lives are not just for us only to live. It's more than that. And I think that when we forget that it's just about me, myself, and I, and what I got to do, we discount the sacrifices, the love, and the care, and the choices, the few choices, but the determined choices and decisions that were made and actions that were taken by those before us so that you could be in this space. So I think when we remember that, we sit in a space of gratitude. It's really important to own that in our walk each day in the work that we do. Okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but the younger stayed and endured. What do you think was the maybe first of all made us spark or resilience or what was it that caused the younger people to endure, to stay and endure in a different way of thinking about the future and thinking about the present than the elders.
Their elders were in a different place in their lives at that point in time. Whereas I think, like at my parents who came, in their 20s, they were in that stage where they were going to fight for what they wanted. You know, while they were not here during the civil rights movement, my mother would say, well, we would listen to things on the radio, or somebody in the community had a TV. We might be able to see something on TV, but we heard it and we would just want to join the fight. But coming here, they saw, you're not going to stop me. And for going through 20 some odd years of your life, never being told no because of what they look like, it's a hard pill to swallow when you're an adult and it's like, oh, I'm already a fully formed adult in my 20s and I'm going to fight for what I want. Whereas I think my grandparents said, I know where it's good. I don't have energy for this and I'm okay. I'll get my children they have energy. They can do this fight. I'm good. I'm good. I get what I needed and I'm going to go back because life is good where I'm at and I'm happy and I don't have to take up this new battle. My children, they're the new generation. They can do it. My mother would tell me stories, of discrimination, and she would just be shocked. She's like, this is how people in this country think? I'm like, that's what it was when she came here. And she learned to navigate that, and my father had to learn to navigate that in their adult years and still maintain their strength, their fortitude, their identity, and that fight within them and fire to say, you don't get to tell me or redefine me based on your small-minded standards. I know who I am, and we're not waiting for you to tell us who we are, and I'm going to get what I want because I know that if you can have it, I can have it too, because there's nothing wrong with me. So it's just a different mindset and a different level of energy to take on the fight and forge forward knowing that there's a future ahead. You're welcome. Did anyone have at some point think of a story in their life? And I'm not asking anyone to share a story, but just a little nod or a head tilt. Did you think of any moments in your life history that just said, oh my gosh, that was just so impactful? Yeah, you thought, yeah. Mm-hmm. 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 It's powerful. It's a powerful memory and moment that everyone brings. So whether you're coming here from another country or your journey from some small town in the South because your great grandmother and your grandmother and your aunt and somebody came to Chicago, somebody came to Harlem. Like, I know I will tell my mother-in-law's people are from Bishopsville, South Carolina. Anything about Bishopsville. But there's somebody who does sculpting of landscaping and cuts them into animals and some artistic thing. And they came out of Bishopsville. Oh my goodness, she got a video. She got 10 videos. It was like going around, he's from Bishopsville. This is from my community. Oh, oh, oh. And people are like, okay, whatever. But it was the pride of knowing that the small little town, small only no name, but what one stop sign. My husband went there once. He said, "Wow, I can't bring you, but I'll tell you all about it." But it's that small, but such pride in that community that she goes there and everybody knows her because that's her family. Her aunt was the postal worker. Someone else in the family was this. It's like her family ran that town. Um, but it's the history of now coming to New Jersey. They moved from the South to get a better life, give got more opportunities. It's the same thing. And it's always fascinating to hear the journey and what was that pivotal moment that you must stand on and now create new ones now. Because all of you back there, students, yes, you're all students. So all of you came here because some pivotal moment happened in your life where you made a particular decision and then another decision and took action and took another action and then another action. These things happen long before you thought you were going to do these things. There were seeds that were planted long before anybody knew you would exist, but there was a vision that was pre-seen with a desire, and you're reaping that. So what that means now is whatever you do, you're now the newer ancestors that are going to be leaving steps behind for someone coming after you. So whatever you say, whatever you do is very impactful. It's not just flippant, because your life is not just about you. You're now creating the new set of seeds for the future. And it's a big deal. It's an honor to be able to do that, because some people did not get that opportunity. And my mother at 2.5 pounds almost did not have that opportunity either. Mhm. 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 There was a pivotal moment in that segregated Norfolk, Virginia, you said? Segregated Norfolk. And that was something that clicked in her that stirred her to make a decision and take some action and leave. But prior to her, there were some other decisions that got her to that moment to get you all up here. So there's a lot of things that we just don't know that have been planted that enable you to be in this space right here, right now, in addition to your mother. Mm. Oh my gosh. Oh wow, to get my doctorate, to get to where I am today. You know, let's see, which end do I answer the question? My journey toward my doctorate was more than just me. Um, my doctorate meant a lot to me, but it also meant a lot to my family. And because I knew my family's history and story, getting higher education and pursuing a doctorate um, was one of those historical wins. My grandmother never went to college. She maybe barely finished high school. Okay, my parents had some college, but they didn't get a bachelor's degree. They came to this country and they said, "We work, all you do is study and learn. Okay? Get an education. That can't be taken away from you. Your mind is yours. Nobody can take it out of your head. You get an education and then you can make decisions for your life." So getting the doctorate was more than just me saying, I'm tired today, I don't feel like it. It was, I'm standing on shoulders. I'm building a legacy. And I have a responsibility, not just to myself, but the people around me. um, on a day to day, most of my higher ed career has been in institutions that serve diverse students, students of color primarily. And I always see myself walking through the buildings in the form of you all, in the form of students all around the university. So it's familiar to me, and I know that my presence is it's, and like I said, well, you didn't catch the beginning. Yeah, okay, yeah, I'm a dean. I'm the yeah, that's nice. But it's more than that. It's a responsibility to help guide you. So when I talk about those moments and those influences, they go beyond family. You know, these are societal influences, you know. And for every student who I interact with, who comes through my office, it's an opportunity to plant more seeds. So that's what keeps me grounded, is that my job is not about any particular title or flaunting it. It's about each and every life I get to touch, including the staff I work with and the faculty. Um, to be in this role and to be able to connect with a number of people, it's a responsibility to wield it wisely and to be able to influence people in their thoughts and their actions about how we see the world around us as it's been changing. So it's intentional, it's thoughtful, it's a daily journey that I don't take lightly. So, yeah, I think we have time. We have time. I guess. Yeah. Oh. Mhm. 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 I have if I answer, if I understand it correctly, be I feel like we on a deeper level have a soulful connection, that more soulful connection, that when I always every now and then I'll have a conversation with someone who will say, "Oh, did you know so and so?" No, but how did you know? You saw, we recognized someone who will say, "How you doing?" We'll give a nod to someone who is, you understand what I'm saying? How you doing? So when we do that, I always say that it's our opportunity to validate the humanity in each other, that which we were not allowed to do, because when we did it, it was considered a threat. And being able to, how you doing? See, I see you. I see you. I believe that there's a deeper soulful connection, that we move in spaces around each other and see each other, without everybody always knowing that we see and know each other in that deeper way. I may not know your name, I know your whole life, but there is that understanding that I see you. You know, I recognize that there is a soul in you and you are human to me. And I feel like that is a really important connection, that validation that we give to each other, whether or not we personally know each other, but it's a recognition of, I see you, I understand, I've been in your journey, similar type of journey. We've all come from the same place, and I'm going to recognize that in you as we cross paths and go down the street. I feel like that's a depth to why we're connected. That's what always resonates with me, and the idea of, beyond that, I know you saw it, but yeah. There we go. Oh, thank you. Well, thank you very much. I'm going to go now.
So I would just want to ask everyone, is if the program is going to be concluded, if we can ask everyone to come to the stage just to take a picture. We're just doing a photo documentation for the event to let everybody know that this event did exist and that we did have participation. So we would just appreciate that very much. Mm-hmm.